Sophia Chen never expected her life to change that night. The 26-year-old art curator stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, feeling out of place among San Francisco's elite. Her simple black dress, bought on sale and carefully preserved for special events, was a stark contrast to the designer gowns that sparkled around her. She was only here because her boss at the struggling downtown gallery had fallen ill. Just show up, smile, and try to get some donations, he had told her. Sophia needed this job, so she came, despite feeling like she didn't belong. Across the room stood Warren Reynolds, the 73-year-old tech billionaire whose name graced buildings across the city. Few people in the room knew what Warren had learned last week, that the cancer in his pancreas had spread, giving him months, not years, to live. Warren watched the young woman in the simple dress. While others worked the room with practiced smiles, she stood transfixed before a painting, truly seeing it. Something about her honest appreciation caught his attention. "You prefer Rothko to the Picasso?" Warren asked, appearing beside her. Sophia jumped slightly, then looked up at the tall, thin man in an expensive suit. She recognized him immediately but tried not to show it. "I do," she answered honestly. "This one speaks to the soul, not just the eyes." Warren's eyebrows rose. For the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of genuine interest. Most people just pretend to understand abstract art. "I don't see the point in pretending," Sophia said with a small shrug. "Life's too short." The irony of her words hit Warren hard. Indeed, life was too short. His was ending soon, while hers was just beginning. "I'm Warren," he said, offering his hand. "I know," she smiled. "I'm Sophia Chen. I work at the Downtown Arts Collective. The one doing the children's program in underserved neighborhoods." Now it was Sophia's turn to be surprised. "You know about that?" "I make it my business to know where real work is happening in this city," he said. They talked for hours that night, finding a quiet corner away from the crowd. Warren was struck by her passion for making art accessible to everyone. Sophia was impressed by his genuine interest in her work, not just her appearance like most men she met. When Warren mentioned his recent diagnosis, sharing this heavy secret with a stranger somehow felt right. He expected pity or awkward silence. Instead, Sophia asked, "What do you want to do with the time you have left?" No one had asked him that. His doctors focused on treatments. His business partners worried about succession plans. His adult children, James, Diana, and Michael, seemed already focused on their inheritance. "I don't know," Warren admitted. "I built buildings, made money. What does it all mean in the end?" "Maybe that's what you need to figure out," Sophia said gently. At midnight, when Warren's driver brought the car around, he found himself reluctant to end their conversation. "Could we continue this discussion over dinner tomorrow?" he asked. Sophia hesitated. She knew what this would look like, a young woman with a dying billionaire. People would talk, but something about Warren's honest eyes made her nod. "I'd like that," she said simply. Neither Sophia nor Warren knew that this night would start a chain of events that would eventually shock the world. As they said goodbye, the seeds of an extraordinary story were already planted, one that would challenge everyone's assumptions about love, money, and true intentions. The news of Warren Reynolds dating Sophia Chen spread through San Francisco like wildfire. Photographers waited outside restaurants to catch glimpses of the unlikely pair. Headlines asked what the young beauty saw in the dying billionaire besides his money. "Are you sure about this?" asked Sophia's roommate, as Sophie got ready for her fifth date with Warren. "People are talking." "Let them talk," Sophia replied, applying light makeup in their tiny apartment mirror. "They don't know him like I do." What people didn't see were the quiet moments. How Warren listened when Sophia talked about her immigrant parents who worked double shifts to put her through college. How they stayed up discussing books and art. How his eyes lit up when she entered a room. For Warren, Sophia was a breath of fresh air. His world was full of people wanting something from him. His children rarely called unless they needed money. Business partners eyed his company, but Sophia asked for nothing. "Why do you spend time with me?" Warren asked one evening as they walked along the beach. His health was still good enough for short walks, though he tired easily. "Because you see me," she answered simply. "Not where I came from or what I look like, just me." At the Reynolds Technologies office, Warren's 3 children held an emergency meeting. She's after his money, obviously, said James, the oldest at 45. We need to protect Dad. He's a grown man, Diana argued, though she shared her brother's concerns. A grown man with terminal cancer and a girlfriend half a century younger, Michael, the youngest, pointed out. We need a prenup at minimum. They were even more alarmed when Warren invited Sophia to his Napa Valley estate for the weekend. When she arrived, Warren dismissed the staff for privacy. I want to show you something, he said, leading her to his private art gallery. Sophia gasped. On the walls hung original works by her favorite artists, pieces she'd only seen in books. This is my real collection, Warren explained, not the one I show at parties. He watched her move from painting to painting, eyes wide with genuine appreciation. Sophia, he said suddenly, I don't have much time left. She turned, eyes sad. I know. My life has been full of business deals and empty relationships. Then I met you. Warren took her hands. I know this seems crazy. I know what people will say, but would you consider marrying me? Sophia froze, shocked. Warren? I'm not offering you my money, he continued quickly. I'm offering you my heart, for whatever time I have left. Tears filled her eyes. She thought about the judgment they would face, how her parents would worry, how his children would hate her. Yet in that moment, looking at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, she couldn't imagine saying no. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. 2 weeks later, they held a small ceremony at his estate. Warren's children attended with cold faces and folded arms. Sophia's parents came, confused but supportive of their daughter. A few trusted friends witnessed as they exchanged simple vows. I know what you all think, Warren said during his speech, looking directly at his children, that this is about money or fear of dying alone. But when you find someone who makes each day brighter, you don't question it. You hold on with both hands. As the newlyweds shared their first dance, whispers circulated among the guests. Some bet the marriage wouldn't last a month. Others predicted Sophia would disappear with millions once Warren died. No one, not even Sophia herself, could have predicted what would actually happen next. The doctors had given Warren 6 months to live, yet 3 months after the wedding, he was still fighting. Sophia's presence seemed to give him new strength, though everyone knew it was temporary. The house feels different with you here, Warren told Sophia one morning as they sat on the terrace overlooking the ocean. His face was thinner now, his designer clothes hanging loose on his frame. Better different or worse different? She asked, adjusting his blanket against the cool breeze. Alive, he answered simply. It feels alive again. Warren's mansion had always been filled with staff, cooks, cleaners, gardeners, and security. But as his condition worsened, Sophia made a surprising request. I want to care for him myself, she told Maria, the head housekeeper who had served the Reynolds family for 20 years. Maria frowned. Mrs. Reynolds, this isn't easy work. The nurses are trained for this. I know, Sophia replied, but I want to do it. Keep the nurses for medical needs, but the daily care, bathing, feeding, medication, I'll handle that. Word quickly reached Warren's children. James drove to the mansion immediately. What game are you playing? He demanded when he found Sophia organizing Warren's pills. Trying to prove something? I'm not playing any game, Sophia answered calmly. This is my husband. I want to care for him. For the cameras? For the will? James pressed. There are no cameras here, James, she said. And your father can leave his money wherever he wants. That was never why I married him. That night, Warren woke to find Sophia asleep in the chair beside his bed, a book fallen on her lap. Despite his children's suspicions, she had not hired anyone to take the night shift. She was there, hour after hour. As weeks passed, Warren's condition deteriorated rapidly. The cancer was aggressive, stealing his strength day by day. Yet these difficult times revealed something unexpected about their relationship. Late one night, when pain kept Warren awake, Sophia brought her laptop to his bedside. I have a surprise, she said. On the screen appeared the face of David Lang, Warren's college roommate and once best friend. They had lost touch 30 years ago after a business disagreement. Dave? Warren whispered, eyes wide with surprise. Hey, old friend. David smiled. Your wife found me, said it was time we talked. Tears filled Warren's eyes as they spoke for the first time in decades. When the call ended, he turned to Sophia. "How did you know?" "You mentioned him in your sleep," she said. "You were arguing with him, then apologizing. I thought you might need closure. It wasn't just David." Sophia tracked down several people from Warren's past: an old teacher who influenced his career, a cousin he'd lost touch with, even his first girlfriend from high school. Each conversation brought peace to parts of Warren's life he had left unresolved. For his birthday, despite his weakened state, Sophia arranged something special. Warren was wheeled into their living room to find it transformed. The furniture was gone, replaced by museum-quality displays of his life's journey, photos, letters, and mementos he kept in storage for decades. "Your life story," Sophia explained, wheeling him through the makeshift museum. "For someone who changed the world, you should see it all in one place." Warren's children visited that evening, reluctantly at first. But seeing their father's life displayed with such care and attention to detail moved even James. "She really knows him," Diana whispered to Michael as they watched Sophia explaining a display to their father. "Maybe better than we do," Michael admitted. As Warren's 5th month of borrowed time came to an end, his doctor was amazed he had lasted this long. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," he told Sophia. "I'd never seen someone with his diagnosis fight this hard." But both Warren and Sophia knew they were just buying days now, not months. And in those precious days, something was happening that would shock everyone when the end finally came. 7 months after his wedding to Sophia, Warren Reynolds took his final breath. He died peacefully in his sleep, with his young wife holding his hand. By morning, the news had spread across the world. "Tech billionaire Warren Reynolds dead at 74, read the headlines. "It's finally over," James said to his siblings as they gathered at their family lawyer's office 3 days after the funeral. "Now we'll see what this was really all about." The Reynolds children had been preparing for this day. They had consulted their own lawyers about contesting the will if necessary. They were certain Sophia had manipulated their father into leaving her everything. "Just remember, we need to stay united," Diana reminded her brothers. "Whatever happens today, we face it together." The family lawyer, Thomas Wilson, had worked with Warren for over 30 years. His face revealed nothing as Sophia entered the room, dressed in a simple black dress. She nodded politely to her stepchildren, but received only cold stares in return. "Before we begin," Thomas said, "Warren asked me to play this video." The large screen on the wall came to life, showing Warren sitting in his study. He looked thin, but his eyes were clear and focused. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he began. "First, to my children, James, Diana, and Michael, I've loved you since the day you were born. Nothing will ever change that. But love doesn't mean blindness. Over the years, I've watched you take my wealth for granted, expecting it as your birthright rather than using your own talents to build something meaningful." The 3 siblings shifted uncomfortably in their seats. To Sophia, Warren continued, his voice softening. "You brought light to my final days. You showed me what it means to truly care for someone without expecting anything in return. For that alone, I owe you more than I can ever repay." Thomas paused the video. "Now, I'll read the will itself." The room fell completely silent. "To my wife, Sophia Chen Reynolds, I leave the sum of $5 million in our home in Carmel." Sophia nodded quietly, her expression unchanged. "$5 million?" Michael whispered to Diana. "That's nothing compared to his fortune." Thomas continued. "To my children, James, Diana, and Michael Reynolds, I leave each the sum of $10 million. The siblings looked at each other in confusion. Their father was worth billions, not millions. "The remainder of my estate, valued at approximately $4.6 billion, will be used to establish the Reynolds Earth Initiative, a foundation dedicated to developing innovative solutions to climate change." The room erupted. "This is ridiculous," James shouted, standing up. He was manipulated. He wasn't thinking clearly. Thomas raised his hand for silence and resumed reading. "The Reynolds Earth Initiative will be governed by a board of directors. As my final decision as chairman of Reynolds Technologies, I appoint Sophia Chen Reynolds as executive director of this foundation." The chaos that followed was immediate. James threw his folder across the room. Diana started crying. Michael stared at Sophia with pure hatred. "She did this," James yelled, pointing at Sophia. She turned him against us and stole our inheritance. Sophia remained calm, her hands folded in her lap. She had known this was coming. There's more, Thomas said firmly, turning back to the video. Warren's face reappeared on screen. I know this decision will shock and anger many of you, but before you judge, ask yourselves, have you created anything that will outlive you? Have you used your privileges to help others? My money didn't make me happy, but it can make a difference in the world. Sophia understands this vision. That's why I'm entrusting her with it. He looked directly into the camera, and to those who think Sophia married me for money, you couldn't be more wrong. The prenuptial agreement she signed would have given her much more than $5 million had she simply waited for me to die. This was her idea, to use my fortune to make real change instead of dividing it among people who haven't earned it. The room fell silent as the truth sank in. Sophia had not only not schemed for Warren's billions, she had actively chosen to receive less. As Thomas ended the meeting, the Reynolds children stormed out, already on phones with their lawyers. Only Sophia remained, sitting quietly as the truth of Warren's final decision spread through the financial world, shocking everyone who had judged their marriage. 1 month after the reading of the will, Sophia sat in what used to be Warren's home office, now converted into the temporary headquarters of the Reynolds Earth Initiative. Stacks of papers covered the desk as she reviewed applications from scientists and engineers eager to join the foundation. The media storm had been relentless. Headlines questioned her qualifications to run a multi-billion-dollar environmental foundation. Business magazines called it the greatest heist in history, suggesting she had somehow tricked Warren into giving her control of his fortune. Ms. Reynolds, your 2 o'clock appointment is here, said Linda, the assistant Sophia had hired. Thank you. And please, call me Sophia. The door opened to reveal Dr. Marcus Trent, a renowned climate scientist who had flown in from London. His expression showed the same skepticism Sophia had seen on many faces lately. Dr. Trent, thank you for coming, Sophia said, extending her hand. I'll be honest, Ms. Reynolds, he replied stiffly. I'm here out of respect for Warren's technological contributions. I'm not convinced this foundation is anything more than a tax shelter. Sophia nodded. I understand your doubts. Please, sit down. She opened her laptop and turned it toward him. Before we discuss your potential role, I'd like to show you something. On screen appeared a research paper titled Atmospheric Carbon Capture Through Engineered Algae Systems by Sophia Chen, PhD candidate, MIT Environmental Science, 2017. Dr. Trent's eyes widened as he scanned the document. You wrote this? This was groundbreaking work. The author disappeared before completing. His voice trailed off as realization dawned. Before completing her doctorate, Sophia finished for him. That author was me. She took a deep breath and revealed the truth she had shared with no one except Warren. I was 6 months from finishing my PhD when my father had a stroke. My mother couldn't handle the medical bills alone, so I left MIT to support them, taking whatever jobs I could find. Eventually, I landed at an art gallery because of my minor in art history. Dr. Trent looked stunned. But this research, it could have changed your career. Family came first, Sophia said simply. I never told anyone about my environmental science background. It was too painful to discuss what I'd given up. She walked to the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. The night Warren and I met, we talked about art for hours. But eventually, the conversation turned to climate change. When I mentioned some technical details, he was surprised by my knowledge. Sophia turned back to Dr. Trent. On our 3rd date, Warren asked about my background. I told him everything. He was the first person who understood both my sacrifice and my lost potential. So that's why he chose you to run the foundation. Dr. Trent said slowly. You weren't just his wife, you were a scientist. Warren believed in second chances, Sophia replied. He said my combination of scientific training and artistic vision was exactly what was needed to approach climate solutions differently. She pulled out a folder and handed it to Dr. Trent. This is the Foundation's first project. It builds on my earlier research but takes it in new directions. Warren and I worked on it during his final months. He contributed the technical engineering while I handled the biological systems. Dr. Trent read through the proposal, his expression changing from skepticism to interest to excitement. This could actually work. The integration of biotechnology with Warren's miniaturization techniques is brilliant. Warren believed money alone couldn't solve climate change, Sophia explained. We need new ideas, new approaches. That's what this foundation is about. For the first time, Dr. Trent smiled at her. Count me in. As he left, Sophia returned to the window. She thought of how Warren had recognized her hidden potential when everyone else saw only a young woman who had married a rich old man. Now it was her turn to prove him right. The real work was just beginning, and soon the world would understand there was much more to Sophia Chen Reynolds than anyone had guessed. 3 months after taking control of the Reynolds Earth Initiative, Sophia sat alone in her office reviewing project proposals. The foundation was growing quickly, already employing 30 scientists and engineers. But the weight of running such a massive organization while facing constant public scrutiny was taking its toll. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. There's someone here to see you, Linda said nervously. It's James Reynolds. He doesn't have an appointment. Sophia took a deep breath. Warren's oldest son had been the most vocal opponent of the will, giving harsh interviews calling her a manipulative gold digger and promising legal action. Send him in, Sophia said, straightening her papers. James entered, his tall frame reminding her of Warren. His face was tight with anger, but something else showed in his eyes. Exhaustion, perhaps. You've been avoiding my calls, he said without greeting. I've been busy building what your father wanted, Sophia replied calmly. Please sit down. To her surprise, he did. For a moment, neither spoke. Our lawyers say we can't win, James finally said. The will is solid. The video testimony makes it clear Dad was of sound mind. Sophia nodded but remained silent. So you've won, he continued bitterly. You got control of billions while his own children got practically nothing. Is that why you're here? To tell me I've won something I never wanted? James looked confused. What do you mean you never wanted it? You're controlling the money. I'm not controlling anything, Sophia said firmly. Every dollar goes to the foundation. I take only a standard executive director salary, less than what you earn at your investment firm. She opened a drawer and pulled out 3 envelopes. Your father asked me to give you these when the time was right. I think that's now. James stared at the envelopes, each labeled with one of the Reynolds children's names. What are these? Letters from your father. He wrote them in his final weeks. With hesitant hands, James opened the envelope with his name. As he read, his face changed. The anger slowly melted away, replaced by something softer, grief, perhaps, or regret. He knew, James whispered, about the company I've been trying to start, about how I was afraid to tell him because he'd always criticized my business ideas. Sophia nodded. He knew all of you better than you realized. He says he's proud of me for wanting to build something on my own. James continued, his voice breaking slightly. That's why he limited our inheritance. He wanted us to create our own legacies. James looked up, tears in his eyes. There's more. He says you helped him see this, that you convinced him true parental love means believing in your children's ability to succeed on their own. A moment of silence hung between them. There's something else you should see, Sophia said, turning her computer screen toward him. This is the Foundation's organizational chart. James scanned the document, his eyes stopping at 3 empty boxes near the top. Board of Directors, he read aloud. Position 1, open. Position 2, open. Position 3, open. Your father wanted his children involved, Sophia explained. Not as entitled heirs, but as partners who earned their places. These positions are for you, Diana, and Michael, if you want them. Why would you offer this after how we've treated you? Because it's what Warren wanted, and because this foundation needs the Reynolds family to succeed. She handed him a folder. This contains all our current projects. Review them, talk to your siblings. The positions come with fair compensation, but they require real work and commitment. James opened the folder, scanning the first page. His eyebrows rose. This carbon capture technology is revolutionary. Yes, Sophia said simply. Your father's last great innovation. As James read more, his expression changed from skepticism to genuine interest. For the first time, he was seeing the foundation not as his stolen inheritance, but as his father's final achievement. I'll talk to Diana and Michael, he said finally, standing to leave. At the door, he paused. I was wrong about you, wasn't I? Sophia smiled sadly. Most people were. After James left, Sophia opened her desk drawer and touched a small photo of Warren. It's happening, she whispered. Just like you hoped. The family Warren loved was slowly coming together around the mission that mattered most to them, and Sophia, once an outsider, might soon become the bridge that united them. 3 years passed since Warren's death. The Reynolds Earth Initiative headquarters now occupied a striking glass building in downtown San Francisco. The logo, a stylized tree with roots forming the letter R, had become recognized worldwide as a symbol of environmental innovation. Inside her office, Sophia stood before a wall of screens, watching live feeds from 12 different countries. Each screen showed the same technology in action: massive structures that looked like artificial trees, pulling carbon from the air 20 times more efficiently than natural forests. The Indonesia installation is now fully operational, reported Diana Reynolds, who had joined the foundation as Director of Global Operations 18 months ago. Her initial coldness towards Sophia had gradually warmed into professional respect, then genuine friendship. That's the 12th country, Sophia said, unable to hide her excitement. Warren would be so proud. The carbon capture technology they had developed, building on Sophia's earlier research and Warren's engineering innovations, had moved from concept to global implementation faster than anyone thought possible. The Reynolds children had proven instrumental in this success. James handled business partnerships, Diana managed international operations, and Michael led the foundation's policy team. CNN wants another interview, said Michael, entering with a tablet in hand. They're calling us the Manhattan Project of Climate Solutions. Sophia smiled. Tell them we'll do it, but only if they cover the science, not the family drama. The family drama had become a minor celebrity story over the years, especially after James publicly defended Sophia against a particularly nasty podcast host who had called her a grave-robbing bride. She could have had billions personally, James had said in that now-famous interview. Instead, she chose to honor my father's vision and build something meaningful. Anyone who questions her motives hasn't been paying attention. The office door opened as Linda showed in a group of visitors, United Nations officials who had flown in to discuss expanding the initiative to 5 more countries. Dr. Reynolds will see you now, Linda announced, using the title Sophia had finally reclaimed after completing her doctorate through a special program at Stanford. As the meeting began, Sophia's phone buzzed with a message from James. Turn on CNBC now. Excusing herself briefly, she stepped into the adjacent room and switched on the television. The business news anchor was speaking excitedly. Breaking news from the Nobel Committee. The Reynolds Earth Initiative's carbon capture technology has been recognized with this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The committee specifically cited the work of Dr. Sophia Reynolds and the late Warren Reynolds in developing technology that may have altered the trajectory of climate change. Sophia froze, overwhelmed. The Nobel Prize had never been their goal. They had simply wanted to make a difference. Her phone rang immediately. James again. Did you see? He asked, his voice breaking with emotion. I saw, she whispered. Dad would have been. James couldn't finish. I know, Sophia said. He is. After composing herself, Sophia returned to the meeting. The UN officials had heard the news and greeted her with applause. As they discussed implementation details for the next phase, Sophia noticed a familiar figure watching through the glass wall. Martha Kimball, the reporter who had written the first nasty story about her marriage to Warren. Once the meeting ended, Martha approached cautiously. Dr. Reynolds, may I have a moment? Sophia nodded, though she felt her guard rising. I owe you an apology, Martha said, surprising her. 3 years ago, I wrote that you were a beauty who married a dying billionaire for his money. I was wrong. Yes, you were, Sophia agreed simply. I'd like to make it right, Martha continued. Let me tell the real story, how a brilliant scientist gave up her career to support her family, then found both love and a second chance with Warren Reynolds. How together, you created something that's literally saving our planet. Sophia considered the offer. For years, she had avoided personal interviews, focusing only on the foundation's work. But perhaps now, with the Nobel announcement, it was time to correct the record. One condition, Sophia said. The story isn't just about me. It's about the entire Reynolds family and how we came together after nearly being torn apart. As Martha left with her interview scheduled, Sophia returned to the wall of screens showing their technology at work around the world. This was Warren's true legacy, not his billions, but the vision of what those billions could accomplish in the right hands. And somehow, against all odds, those hands have been hers. 5 years to the day after Warren Reynolds' death, hundreds of guests filled the Grand Hall of the Global Innovation Center. The occasion was the prestigious Horizon Award, given annually to those who changed the world for the better. This year's recipient, Dr. Sophia Chen Reynolds. Cameras flashed as Sophia walked onto the stage. At 31, she looked different from the young art curator who had met a billionaire at a charity gala. Her eyes held the confidence of someone who had faced doubt and criticism yet persevered. She wore a simple blue dress, elegant but practical, much like the woman herself. Behind her walked James, Diana, and Michael Reynolds. The sight of the four of them together, united on stage, caused a stir in the audience. Their journey from bitter enemies to family had captured public imagination. 5 years ago, began the host, many people thought they knew the story of Sophia Chen and Warren Reynolds. A beautiful young woman, a dying billionaire. We all jumped to conclusions. Sophia smiled slightly as the host continued. Yet today, we honor Dr. Reynolds not for who she married, but for what she built. The carbon capture technology developed by the Reynolds Earth Initiative now operates in 27 countries. Global carbon levels have dropped for the first time in 50 years. This is not just innovation, it is hope made real. The audience applauded as Sophia stepped to the microphone. For a moment, she simply looked out at the crowd, remembering how far she had come. Thank you for this honor, she began. But I must start with the truth. The story you think you know about Warren and me isn't entirely accurate. A hush fell over the room. When I met Warren Reynolds, I wasn't just a struggling art curator. I was a former environmental science student who had abandoned her dreams to support her family. During our first meeting, I recognized who he was immediately, not just a billionaire, but the owner of Reynolds Technologies, whose resources could fund the climate solutions I had once hoped to develop. Murmurs spread through the audience. Yes, Sophia continued with a small smile. I approached Warren with an agenda. I wanted to discuss my research ideas with him. I thought perhaps he might fund a small lab where I could continue my work. She paused, her voice softening. What I didn't expect was to find a brilliant mind and a kind heart that matched my passion for change. I didn't expect to fall in love. Beside her, James nodded encouragingly. Warren and I connected over our shared vision for the future. When he proposed, I was torn. I truly loved him, but I knew the world would see only a gold digger marrying a dying man. Sophia looked at the Reynolds children. Warren was wiser than any of us. He structured his will specifically to protect me from those accusations, while ensuring his children would build their own legacies rather than live in his shadow. The foundation was our shared dream, a way to solve problems that would outlive both of us. The truth is, she continued, Warren and I were partners in every sense. During his final months, while the world thought I was simply a caretaker, we were designing the technology that would eventually win the Nobel Prize. Those late nights by his bedside weren't just filled with personal care, they were filled with scientific discussions, engineering problems, and dreams of what might be possible. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. The real story isn't about a young beauty and a dying billionaire. It's about looking beyond surface appearances to see potential in unexpected places. Warren saw potential in me when others saw only a pretty face. I saw potential in his children when others saw only entitled heirs. She gestured to the Reynolds siblings. Together, we built something none of us could have created alone. That is Warren's true legacy, not his money, but his ability to bring together the right people around a common purpose. As the audience rose in a standing ovation, Sophia felt a sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, filled with public scrutiny, family tension, and countless technical challenges. Yet standing here with her newfound family, seeing the impact of their work, she knew it had all been worthwhile. The young woman who had once abandoned her dreams had found them again in the most unexpected way, and the dying billionaire who had married her had found not just love in his final days, but immortality through the work that would continue long after all of them were gone.